let me know when I'm
Yep.
on air?
Yes, I will let you know.
Perfect.
So we are live, but it'll take about a minute or two to push to YouTube.
Perfect.
It looks like we are live. I'm going to do a quick audio visual check, everybody. Can everybody maybe just chat in Slack if you're able to see our screen, Bilingual AAC, and get some good audio? Please post that into Slack channel track 3.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
Let's hang tight for just a sec. Looks like we'll wait for some confirmations.
Great.
Okay, we have confirmation on audio and visual. So thank you, everybody, for joining us on our 3rd hour of AAC in the Cloud. We've got Jose Perez joining us from Assistiveware. So thank you so much for coming and presenting today, Jose. I'll go ahead and just pass it right over to you.
Great. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And my presentation is going to be about Bilingual AAC. And I would like to give you a little bit of introduction about a little bit bilingualism in general, also bilingual AAC more concretely, and some strategies for implementation that I hope you may find useful. So first introduce myself. My full name is Jose Antonio Perez Madrid because I'm Spanish and we love really long names. And my title in Assistiveware is product owner. So that means that I'm involved in the design and production of basically all our products. And I'm also the creator of the Spanish and French vocabularies in Prologo2Go, in the Crescendo vocabulary that's included in Prologo2Go. And at the bottom, you have my Twitter if you want to hit me there. So as I said, I work for Assistiveware. Assistiveware is a company that develops AAC solutions and also some AD solutions as well, mostly for iOS and Mac. So some of our products that you may or may not know about are Prologo2Go. It's a simple supported AAC solution that's currently available in English, Spanish, and French, and is fully bilingual in any of those languages. And another of our apps that you may know about is Prologo for Text. It's a text-based AAC. It's very self-descriptive. So let's start with bilingualism. Bilingualism in general, some preconceptions or a few ideas that I would like to talk about and hopefully clarify a little bit. So the first thing to realize is that over 50% of the world population speaks more than one language. And this is a very conservative number. Depends on how you count somebody as bilingual or multilingual or not. This percentage can go to 60 to 75% of the world population. So speaking more than one language is the norm, not the exception. Most people on Earth do it, and most of them acquire 2 languages at the same time. Another thing that sometimes you hear about is that exposing children to more than one language can hurt the language development. But the thing is that children don't really get confused by this dual input in 2 different languages. There is a tiny bit of truth to this. And it's, you know that at the beginning when children are starting to produce language, they typically start repeating sentences and words as they hear them. Eventually, they become aware of grammar rules and they start applying them. And after they start applying grammar rules, they over-apply them. So similarly regressing in their expressive language to things, to irregular constructions they could say before correctly. Now they are doing it incorrectly because they are overusing that rule. Now, eventually, over time, they learn the exceptions to the rule and they fully comprehend these grammar rules. So this expressive language comes back. Well, that happens between languages as well. So a rule that may be discovered in one of the languages, it may start it may start being applied on the second language, and it may seem as some kind of confusion or some kind of problem. This exposure to two languages is hurting the language development. In reality, this is just a natural process of acquiring language, and there is nothing exceptional or nothing really to worry about. So there has been a lot of research about this, and it's definitely not harmful. So in countries with a majority of bilingual or multilingual speakers, the number of people that develop language disorders is comparable to countries with mostly monolingual speakers. And as we showed before, being bilingual or multilingual is normal. It's just the norm. So no, you can rest assured exposing a child to two languages is not going to hurt their language development. This is another one that sometimes hear some kind of idea floating around that a new language is not acquired, a new language is acquired at the expense of an already existing one. So quite a few people believe that learning a new language can make you somehow forget an existing one, or at least make you less fluent in the language that you have already acquired. And there is, again, quite a bit of research about this, and that's not how language works. Actually, it's quite the contrary. When you already have acquired a language, learning the second one, you're going to use the knowledge that you already have about your first language to build on the second, and new things that you learn on your second language are going to contribute to the first one. So there is going to be this, this dynamic between the two languages, and one reinforces the other. And we will talk about this a little bit more down the line. Also, something I want you to be aware of is that there have been made some really bold claims about the benefits of being bilingual or multilingual. And some of these are currently under scrutiny. Just there were a couple of studies, this is the biggest one, a couple of studies that were talking about a great increase in executive function for people that are bilingual or multilingual. And it seems that this increase in executive function, it was greater depending on how many languages you were fluent on. So it turned out that those results cannot be repeated. So there are many, many good things about speaking more than one language, but be wary of those really bold claims. So basically, you are not smarter because you can speak more than one language, and learning to speak more than one language is not going to make you smarter. That's the gist of it. So this one is specifically about children with communication disorders, that is closer to the area that we're going to talk about. And again, there is a general conception that bilingualism is too taxing for children with language disorder, that somehow it's going to hurt their chances of acquiring language. But there are already some studies coming, and they all show the same pattern, and is that bilingual children with a communication disorder perform similarly to monolingual peers. So the fact that they are bilingual or they are immersed in a bilingual situation is not making them perform better nor worse than their monolingual peers. So again, rest assured, you are not hurting them by doing that. Now that we set already the tone of the talk, let's move a little bit into bilingual AAC. And something I would like to tell you is why I think it's a really good idea to support children that are already immersed in a bilingual situation. So sharing a language means children are better integrated in their families and communities. Is that sharing the same language is sharing the same culture and sharing the same values. So if you are able to speak the same language as everybody else around you, there is less of a stigma about being non-verbal and a greater chance of being seen as part of the community. And this is going to be very, very important for minority communities to see that their child can communicate in the same language as them and can communicate with the rest of the community and the rest of the family. You're also going to get more input by supporting the home language. So being able to participate in conversation at home means more opportunities for modeling and more opportunities for spontaneous novel utterance generation. And this is exactly the kind of thing we want to promote. So being able to participate in the conversations going around you with your own words, without the need of prompts, that's going to be more difficult if you can participate in the conversation in the same language as everybody else. And also being able to use the same language as the rest of the people in your environment increases the amount of language input, as the models you get from the conversations going around you can be put to use directly without translation. And not only that, it's going to be easier for the people around you to model language for you in your AAC system. You're also going to find more acceptance, and this one I think is quite critical. So being able to participate in the home dynamics and conversations means better acceptance of AAC by the family and community. So if your system allows you to communicate as an equal with the people around you, there is a greater chance of the AAC system to be seen as your voice. On the other hand, an AAC system that can only be used in the nominal language is often seen by bilingual families as a therapy tool or something to be used only at school. So supporting the home language is very important for the success of an AAC system, and it's used in the long term. And when you read the studies about AAC use in bilingual families, but you find out there is a high rate of people dropping the system and not using them at school, or downright rejecting the system at home. And the main reason for this is speaking their own language. It's not speaking the same language as everybody else. So if you want to foster acceptance of the AAC system in the family at all, you should consider strongly also support the home language to really build on that acceptance. And finally, supporting the home language, it also means more language in general. So in both languages are supported, their language skills can be used to facilitate the acquisition of the second language, and vice versa. The thing how this works is when you discover a new communication function and new ways to get your message across, you're going to try to reuse those new patterns you learned in your home language, for example. Sometimes you will be successful. It works, actually, the pattern works in both languages. Other times, a different pattern may be required in the second language, but your intention is more likely going to be understood by the listener, opening opportunities for recasting, and this time getting the right message in that secondary language. It becomes a teaching opportunity. This way, both languages complement each other, and patterns discovered in one language spill over into the other language, increasing your total language output and quality. And also the metalinguistic aspects of your AAC system are either identical or very similar in both languages. So things like how to navigate your system, how to recover from an unintentional selection, etc. So the gains made from practicing with your system in one language are going to translate directly to the other language as well. So hearing all this, my deepest hope is you may say, okay, that sounds awesome. You have convinced me. I want to do this. Now the question is, well, how do you do that? How do you support the home language? So there are two main things you're going to need to do this. On one side, you're going to need a good vocabulary that's designed to be used in a bilingual environment. And the second is going to be a set of practices or approaches to implement this bilingual system effectively. Let's start talking about the vocabulary. So what it is a bilingual vocabulary and how you go about using one or creating one. So the first thing to notice is, please do not attempt a translation of a core word system. It just doesn't make any sense. So when you translate an English core word system word by word to Spanish, for example, the end result is not Spanish core word system. The words that are placed there in a core word system are very carefully chosen to support particular intents and functions and grammars and systems. When you translate, you are not translating the intention of the creator for why that word is there. So you need to be really, really careful about that. Of course, you can translate the fridge. You can translate all your foods. You can translate all your places. Those, no problem at all. But the core words, you need to be super careful about those. I'm going to try to elaborate why. So for once, the vocabulary must reflect how children learn and use each of the languages. So this is not only about grammar and the word selection. You also need to contemplate how native speakers and second language learners acquire a particular language. What are their first sentences? What kind of constructions tend to favor? In which order they typically acquire the different features of the language? All of those things need to be represented in your vocabulary. Also, layout, grammar systems, and word selections are optimized for each language independently. So different languages normally mean different layouts, different grammar systems, and different modal planning. So you should try to make both languages share as much modal planning as layers as possible. It makes sense. But what it doesn't make sense is what it doesn't make sense is to try to fit one language into the modal planning of the other when it just doesn't make sense, but it's not properly supported. So what you need to target here is that both languages make sense on their own, and later figure out similarities. How can you make them as similar as possible so you can share as much modal planning as possible? Another thing that's critical is code switching between languages at any time. We believe that the AAC users should be able to change languages on his or her own in a time-sensitive manner. Instead, in the real world, the separation between languages can be quite blurry. They tend to speak into each other constantly. It's quite common to use some English words when speaking Spanish, for example, especially when Spanish is the home language and English is the dominant language. So it's important that the AAC system takes this behavior into account and allows the mixing of languages even in mid-sentence in an extra quick manner, because that is the way people in this community speak. So what we need to represent in our system is the reality in which they live in. Also, you're going to have to pay attention to include culturally appropriate vocabulary. So the thing is, if you cannot talk about the things you care about, there is less of a reason to talk at all, right? So while just core words can get you a very long way, you also want access to culturally relevant vocabulary. And this is not only about food items, TV shows, and holidays. You want idioms, jokes, and expressions that represent the language and its culture and values. So when dealing with a bilingual situation, your culture is your culture, no matter which language you are speaking. So it should be easy to customize the vocabulary so you get access to all the things you care about in both languages. Now, the end result of following all of this is that core word systems in different languages can end up being quite different, further away than a simple translation. And I would like to show you some of the differences in our English and our Spanish vocabularies that we implemented for Bloco2Go. So this is a screenshot of our English core word vocabulary. And if you have used Prologo 2 in the past, you are super familiar with this. And let me bring the cursor. So you have the pronoun area here. In pink, you have the whole verb area. Green here, preposition area. Here we have the describey, adverby, control area. We call it the blue area. It's a little bit of mixture of things. This is the conjunction area down here. And up here, you have the questions. So now, this is the Spanish version of the same vocabulary. So as you can see, the general layout is the same. We have in the left, the pronoun area. Here, the pink, we have all of the verbs. We have the prepositions, the adjectives, adverbs, conjunctions, and question words. But if you look closely at the different parts of the vocabulary, they don't have the same shape. You have a different number of verbs in English versus Spanish, and a different number of pronouns in English versus Spanish. And when you think about how the languages work, it makes all the sense in the world. In English, you have a lot of combinations of a verb with a preposition to create new meaning. In Spanish, we have way less of that, and what we have more is about specific verbs for specific actions. So, for example, in English, you say go up. In Spanish, we normally say subir. We have a specific verb to say go up, a specific word for it. Also, when you compare in this cursor again, in this top area, you say the is, can, will, do. So you have your to be verb, and then you have a group of auxiliary verbs, helper verbs. In Spanish, we don't have that because verbs don't need auxiliaries or don't need helpers as often, but the to be verb has to be split into two. So those are the kind of differences that we had to do just for the word selection. Now, this is how a verb inflection looked like in the English system. So I have the pronoun I pre-selected, and I get the conjugations that make sense for this pronoun. Because again, in English, once you have a pronoun in the sentence that is followed immediately by a verb, 99% of the times that verb is conjugated to agree with the grammatical person of the pronoun. When we go to Spanish, we have a different story. So this time, we don't try to pre-conjugate. By the way, in this case, I is also inserted from the message window, in this case, yo. So we offer this for all the grammatical persons, right? So why is that? So in Spanish, we have many verbs support the reflexives and the dative cases. So for example, I pick a first person pronoun, yo. Yo quiero, I like, okay? But if I pick a reflexive first person pronoun, me. Now I can pick quiero to say I love myself, why not? Or I can pick quiere to say he or she loves me. So this is again another example of how languages working differently means you're gonna have to rethink your strategy for your word selection, and in this case, for your grammar. This is how adjectives look like in English. So you have your root form, your comparative, your superlative, and your adverb. When we go to Spanish, it turns out that adjectives need to agree on gender and number with the noun they're attached to. So that means that we have masculine and feminine, masculine plural, feminine plural. And we're going to have a comparative. The comparative is a special case because we inflected the word bien, which means good. Most adjectives in Spanish don't have a comparative form, and you just use them more. So in Spanish, instead of better, not a good example. In Spanish, instead of say, in Spanish, you will use the more, the equivalent to more. You will use más plus the adjective to do that. And here we have also the adverb. Now, when we were talking about culturally relevant vocabulary, well, we have to do that as well. And this is a sample of the kind of symbols we ask for Spanish and the kind of vocabulary we asked to make sure that people using the vocabulary in Spain, in this case, will have vocabulary that's relevant to them. Now, we've talked a little bit about the vocabulary, what you expect about a bilingual vocabulary. Now, let's move on to practices. So some of you may be asking yourself this particular question: how do I support the home language if I can speak it? And that is a very good question indeed. So supporting two languages does not necessarily mean that both languages must be supported at once by the same interventionist. So that is the good news. You don't have to do it alone. But still, the best case scenario is the fully bilingual interventionist supporting both languages. The thing with this is, while bilingual interventionists do exist, it's very rare to find a person that's perfectly fluent in both languages and knows the intricacies and not all the little details of language development for both languages to the point where she or he can provide effective intervention for both. So while this is the best case scenario, I really wouldn't hold my breath. I imagine this is not going to be the case for most of you. And it's going to be very hard to find this superhero SLP to save the day. Now, another very good case scenario would be one interventionist for each language. Now, if you have the resources, you could try to find one SLP for each language and make sure you share notes and you work towards the same goals and you keep it in check, you keep it sync about what you are working on in English, what you're working on in Spanish. And this would be an amazingly good solution. If you can go for this, this is the one I will try to seek, definitely. But again, this is more attainable than the perfectly bilingual SLP. But let's be honest, it's hard enough to get resources for speech therapy just for one language. So imagine fighting for resources to get speech therapy support for two languages. So if you can afford to do it, please do it. But I also understand that many of you are going to be in a situation in this case is also unattainable. So this is another, let's call it quite good scenario. It's definitely not bad. So in this scenario, you're going to have one interventionist for the dominant language. If you are in the US, this is going to be English, that supports the family to work on the home language. So that means that you are going to provide therapy. You're going to provide therapy in the school language, English if you're in the US. And then you're going to ask around the school or hospital or wherever you work. And likely you are going to find some native speakers of Spanish in the staff, maybe a teacher or an aide, and they don't need to know anything about speech therapy, but they can help you with the customization in the vocabulary and help you defining words to target for different contexts and intents. And for the actual modeling and the actual intervention, you are going to try to rely on the family to carry that at home. So I believe this is going to be the most likely scenario in which you are going to be. So as I said, when you don't speak the home language, the family is your best ally. So you're going to try to identify people in the family that are bilingual, so you can communicate effectively with them and make them your proxy for intervention at home. You are also going to have to put effort in understanding enough of the family dynamics, so you find your way on how to motivate them to work on AAC at home. And this last part, find your way into the family dynamics, is going to be no small task at all, because most likely this is going to be a family that's going to have a different culture than yours. So some of these things are going to be hard to understand or counterintuitive. So you're going to have to work your way in. And the first step is to actually get access to the family. That sometimes is not that easy. So you should do it. You should try to do it. But I understand it's not easy. Then I'm asking quite a bit of you. Now, when you are working with the family, one thing that's going to be really important is to include them in the decision making. You make sure to include them as much as possible so they feel invested in the process. So you try to discuss with them different day systems they could use and which one they prefer, offer them different intervention strategies, and work with them to figure out which one would help them achieve their child and their own goals. And make sure that they have a say as much as possible. And I think that's going to be one of the key pillars in getting the family invested in the process. And getting them invested is going to be the first step towards a successful intervention at home. Next, you're going to have to train the family members on basic AAC techniques. Remember, they are going to be the ones doing the actual intervention in the home language, so they need to know what to do, how to do it, and when to do it. So the basic AAC intervention techniques are quite easy for almost everybody to learn, but it takes time and practice to develop confidence. So be patient and understanding, celebrate their successes, and try to be constructive in your criticism. But it's definitely something worth doing. And finally, work with the family to identify interactions at home that could be leveraged for intervention. So you can work with the family, identifying moments, for example, in the daily routine in which to model language. So maybe some routines are particularly difficult, like getting dressed in the morning or going to sleep at night. If you identify these situations with the family and work with them on how to model language in these situations to eventually improve the outcome, not only are you helping the family provide effective language modeling in context, you are also helping them solve real-life situations by improving language skills, adding value and acceptance to their work and the AAC system, and again, being it more likely to be accepted. Also, you can leverage the knowledge of the family of the home language in finding which words to model first and how to introduce certain grammar. The thing about all these different tips or the different suggestions for you to do with the family is that these are already good practices. So no matter if the AAC user is bilingual or not, you are probably already doing this, or at least you are putting effort in making sure you're doing as much of this as possible. So while following this good practice is very important in all cases, it's going to be absolutely critical for bilingual cases, because again, you're going to rely on the family carrying the intervention in the home language. Now, these were general rules, how to get the family on board, how to get the family working for you and for the child. Now, many people like to have like a more systematic approach to the way they implement AAC. So they would like to have specific targets that they can expand and they can iterate upon time. So the two most popular ways of structuring AAC intervention right now are word of the week and activity-specific displays. Word of the week is selecting a word or group of words that you target each week, and you put special emphasis on those words during that week, using them across contexts, trying to use those words to their widest reach, and providing all the meaning and attention that those words can have. And activity-specific is when you define target words to be worked on during specific activities or contexts. So, for example, you may have a word targets for circle time, you may have word targets for lunchtime, another one for art class, etc. Now, both of these approaches are very well tested and valid, but when designing a bilingual intervention, you need to be careful not to make your word selection for English and just selecting the Spanish equivalent words for the Spanish intervention. And to try to explain why that is the case, I'm going to take you on a small detour. So when we created the Spanish version of Prologo to Go, when we started the research about core words in Spanish, there was some already done, but in very specific situations, in a very specific region, and we wanted to cover Spanish words both in America and in Spain, so we did a little bit of our own research. What you're seeing here is the top 20 core words. In the left, you see the words ordered by frequency for Spanish from our analysis. On the right, you're seeing the data from the study of Buckelman, Johnson, Rowan from 1989, which is a study that's widely used when we're creating core word systems. And if you start looking at it, you can see a lot of differences. So, for example, in English, the pronoun I is the most used word, the most frequent one. But in Spanish, it's below halfway. Now, you is position number 4 for English, but the equivalent in Spanish is not even in the top 20. Now, in Spanish, the word no is number 1. That's the thing we say the most, it seems. While in English, equivalents or no, like not and no, are a little bit down the line. When you look at the articles, the same. You have the up there in English. In Spanish, you have a split of the different articles. Because, again, articles need to agree in gender and number. And we have objective articles and personal articles. It's a whole thing. Now, we have the preposition to. It's equivalent to a. And they are both close to the top, so I feel quite good about that. Now, when you look to N, it appears in the top 20, but the equivalent in English doesn't. The same for the. And in English, you have is up there, but equivalents in Spanish are down. So why is that? Why is the word selection, the word frequency, so different between both languages? We go back and we start to think, not about just the words, but we start to think about the intention of those words, about how they work inside the framework of each of the respective languages. Things start to make more sense. For example, English, I number 1, Spanish, Joe below halfway. Why is that? Well, in Spanish, we tend to omit the pronoun when we speak. Normally, you don't say, yo quiero galletas. You just omit yo and say, quiero galletas. So you only use the pronoun when you want to emphasize who did the action. Now, when we analyze the data that we caught, we looked for not when the word yo versus the word I appears, where we started looking at how many of the sentences are first person in both languages. Turns out the frequency is similar. The same goes for the pronoun you. when you don't forget about the word and where you are analyzing, okay, how many of the sentences are second person? Again, the frequency is similar. Now we have this case, no, number one in English versus not no in Spanish. One more time, we go beyond the word, we think about the intent, we think about how you reject things in each of the languages. Turns out in Spanish, the only way to reject is to use the word no. There is no other word to do it. Well, in English, you have not, you have no, and then you have the contractions like couldn't, wouldn't, shouldn't, didn't, mustn't, etc., etc., etc. Now, when you add the frequency of all those negative words or all those rejection words in English and you compare to Spanish, in both languages, is the function number one. The thing that we do the most, the reason for why we communicate the most, is to reject. The article's the same, you add a frequency, they end up in the same place. This is a case in which a versus to in English, they are quite symmetric in their translation. So they are used mostly in the same cases, and they work mostly for the same causes. So because of that, they end up in similar places. And in Spanish, the problem with N in Spanish is when you translate to English, it can translate to either in or on. So in and on are not on the list of the 20 English, they appear below. But again, if you add the frequencies of in on and on, they end up in a similar position to N. And that's the reason why so many people that speak English as a second language tend to mix both up. They say in when they should say on when to say in. I do it a lot, so sorry for that. The same for de. In this case, de is a preposition that we use in Spanish to express ownership, possession. In English, you can use the S form. So that's David's watch. In Spanish, you have to use the preposition de. So reloj de David. So one more time, when you look at the frequency in which possessives appear in English, similar for both languages. And this is the famous split of the verb to be in Spanish. So after we realized this, analyzing the data and comparing them, and by the way, I don't have the French data here, but it turns out to be quite similar indeed. It's super interesting. I love this stuff. Findings. So we say no a lot. That's the reason number one why we communicate, to reject. Also that there are obvious differences in the frequency reviews between languages when you're dealing with translations. But while frequency is different at the word level, the pragmatic level remains almost the same. So the reasons why we communicate are the same across languages and occur roughly with the same frequency about between languages. So with that said, some time ago we developed this system. It's the core work classroom. It's basically a set of materials to help you with implementation, with a more systematic implementation on AAC. So this, which by the way, it's free. You can go to our website and download it. It's marvelous and magnificent, and you should try it. So in this group of materials, we target word groups based on level with grammar and literacy times. There are two ways of using the core work classroom. You can take the core work of the week approach, you can take the activity-specific approach, or you can take a combination of both. And again, you're going to get these target words for level, for the activity, or these target words per week, etc. Now, before you get your hopes too high, know that this is on English only for now. Now, the reason I bring the core work classroom, even if it's only in English, is because how it was designed can help you design your own intervention planning for bilingual, for a bilingual intervention. So the core work classroom follows something called the 3 Ws approach: words, whys, and ways. you have words. These are the words that make up what you say, the words that you use to communicate. You have the whys, and the whys are the intents or the communication functions that those words are trying to convey or achieve. And finally, you have the ways, which is the grammar, basically how words combined with meaning, how they inflect into different forms, etc. So these three elements are tied to each other. So you could start with the words, and you define the words that you want to target, and from there infer the whys, the functions you can achieve with them, are the ways, the syntax or the grammar that you need to use them properly. Also, you can define the whys, and from there, the reasons to communicate you want to target, and from there infer the words or the ways. Or even you can start with the ways, the particular grammar you're targeting, and you can figure out from there which words and which communication functions to target to achieve that objective. So in a monolingual approach, any of these three is valid. Depends on personal preference and the goal you're chasing at the moment. And oh my God, I only have 5 minutes left. But when you are thinking about a bilingual intervention, given what we know about the relationship between the two languages, how intents or functions appear at a similar age with a similar frequency, but words or grammar is different, what it makes sense for you to do is to first think of the whys, the functions or the intents you want to target for both languages at the same time, and from there infer which words and ways to use for English and which words and ways to use for Spanish, because they are going to be different. So when I say ways or functions, what I refer is to this. So this is a list we compiled of communication functions or communication intents, and there are 4 big categories with different functions in each category. So you have getting and giving information, social interaction, lazy repair strategies, expressing needs and wants. Expressing needs and wants very well covered by most people. It seems to be a fan favorite. So instead of expressing needs and wants, you have choice making, getting attention, requesting, directing, etc. Your intention, your goal should be at the end of your intervention, you've covered all these functions. Now, where we were talking about how to use this to create a bilingual intervention plan, the idea would be first to work with the family, identifying opportunities at home, as we already said. Then select the communication functions to target during these opportunities that were identified at home. Based on those communication functions you're going to target, you're going to work with the family or a native speaker, or both, identifying words and ways to achieve that function in the home language. And with that information, you're going to instruct the family on how to model those functions in context. So this is a piece of material of the core work classroom. And I think if you plan to follow this approach for your bilingual intervention, I think it can be really useful. You download this material, again, it's free, and use it for inspiration. So in this, we have getting and giving information. So we have, for example, asking for information, the second one. Things you could try to target with that. What next, what listen to, what do. You will work with the family or a native speaker trying to figure out how would you say those same things in Spanish. Once you get that word, you're going to try to figure out, okay, what grammar support they need to achieve that. And once you get that instruction, then you're going to create an intervention plan specific for a specific time of the day that the family can digest, follow, and implement. So how much language you should support at home? So most studies think that 20% is the threshold for a child to grow bilingual. So over 20% of their input must be in the home language. This may sound like a small amount, but most of these children are going to be swamped by inputs in dominant language at school, the park, television, friends, etc. So a safe approach is to put 100% of the home time modeling and providing input in the home language, as they are probably most likely going to get more than enough input in the nominal language from everywhere else. Lastly, just to tell you that doing this is not always going to be easy. It can be quite a bit of extra work on your already saturated day, for sure. But in the end, supporting the home language is the right thing to do. You can do it with the help of the family, even if you don't speak the home language. And it's definitely worth doing it. And with that, thank you very much for your time. Miraculously, I managed to finish just on time. And if you have any questions, I don't know if you have time for those, but you can send them to me via Twitter, or you can contact us through Facebook, and I will be more than happy to answer any of your questions. And finally, a little bit of references that you can use if you want to read a little bit more about bilingualism and bilingual AAC. I really hope you enjoyed the presentation and that it was useful to you. So thank you very much.
José, muchísimas gracias por la presentación hoy. Fue una placer para escuchar sus palabras. Gracias por asistirnos.
Un placer. Un placer estar aquí y presentar para vosotros.
Excelente. Thank you, José Perez, for the presentation today. That was fantastic. Very helpful information about bilingual. He and I were talking about this just before we jumped on, and we feel like AAC is hugely underutilized in this space. So this will be available after the fact. All of his references, his presentation will be on YouTube. So thanks again, Jose. Any questions? I think there's just one question that came up in the Slack channel, but he provided his contact information, and thank you again so very much.
Well, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for having me. And thank you for the effort you've put organizing this conference. It's really a wonderful thing.
Oh, you bet. Thanks to you guys for providing it with great information. So everybody, we're going to, we'll post the survey and the kind of the follow-up for Jose's, I want to speak in Spanish now, presentación in Slack. So go ahead and fill that out and you'll get your credit of attendance there. And thanks again, and we'll see you guys here in about 10 minutes.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
Take care, Jose.